Hey guys, Chris here. Happy Friday. Welcome to a vlog. These are going to be really casual. I'm just going to be shooting with my iPhone and I don't want to do a whole bunch of video editing. I just want to keep it sort of raw and just talk. So I got really inspired by Chris's video blogs that he's been doing, documenting the music. If you haven't seen it yet, if you haven't seen his series, do check it out. They're fantastic. So he's been documenting his process of how he makes music and all the rest of it. So the votes are in, I guess that means that I'm going to do some video blogs and hopefully they're interesting enough for you. I'm going to try and do them outside. That way you get a little bit of the Okanagan behind us. As you can see, it's a nice place filled with trees, things like that. I'm just going to be shooting this with my iPhone, so hopefully the quality is okay enough for you. And I had a bunch of questions that people have asked me in the past, and I thought, what should I talk about here? I thought it'd be fun to talk about Operation Blackout, because the question that I get a lot is, what's my favorite party? And the truth is that the parties themselves weren't fun for me, because I was, it was more about individual people. Like, I have a very small circle that are my close friend group, because I'm quite an introvert. So parties were not my thing in Penguin. I was really all about PSA missions and stories. Those are the things that sort of jazzed me the most. The thing is, I'm just one guy out of 1,000, literally over 1,000 people that worked on the Club Penguin product. So I have my perspective and everybody else has theirs. But for me, the most memorable event we did was Operation Blackout. And the reason for that is probably to do, what you guys don't know is, what's the origin of the PSA music? Because the original guitar lick that happens in the old PSA stuff, that little guitar stingy thing, that was actually Club Penguin co-founder Dave Crisco. So Dave is a huge fan of guitars, and we went down to LA on one trip, and he disappeared for a while just to go shop for guitars. He's a huge guitar fan. That's why, if you guys are familiar with I've Been Delayed, that's actually his son, because his son is musical too, runs in the family. So the interesting thing is that lick was so good, that guitar little thing, it ended up in the EPF game on the DS, and then later ended up getting reinterpreted back into the game based on that EPF version. So it had this sort of mutation that happened over time. Remember, Chris did a version that was based on the DS version, which was based on Dave's guitar lick. But that theme, that motif, existed right from the get-go. And so when we were doing Operation Blackout, I just thought, hey, you know what? I had the music team, the audio team, and I think we had just made the business case to go, let's have a composer in-house. And we had one guy who was doing some contract work, Nori, and that was sort of the justification to say, hey, look, we can actually have somebody dedicated to music all the time. And it was a change of pace too, because the challenge with music is, as a musician, your style tends to be what you do all the time. So it was a good time to try some new music that was quite different. So that's the one challenge when you're trying to do original music versus doing just licensed stuff. And so I remember we talked to Nori and I said, let's bring it back to actual guitars again, because after it going to the DS and then on to the EPF in the world, it was still synthesizer based or synthetic. And I thought, hey, you know what, let's not just do this with real guitar. Let's have you bring in an amp, bring in your guitar, and let's make this a huge surprise. Let's make this really, really heavy for the first time. Instead of making it light and cheery, we want Blackout to immediately feel like you log into the world and what a surprise. Whoa, why is everything all dark? Why are there statues of Herbert everywhere? why is this music? Whoa, this is intense. And we wanted it to be just shockingly not kiddie. What I mean by that is like, children's music or music that's light and accessible, family-friendly stuff. Like, so Mario is quite family-friendly, right? It has this really cool family-friendly vibe to it. And, I thought, hey, why don't we do this really cool, heavier version of EPF that's just totally unexpected. And so we had a lot of delay on the guitar, a lot of reverb, and a real guitar. And I think that might have been the first time we really explored distortion on a track in Club Penguin. And we did it because it felt like not Club Penguin, which was a really interesting, it was great that we had the opportunity to do that. The other thing that we did that was, besides the music, what I really enjoyed working on was like the sneak peek video, for example. We talked about making it just, taking that intensity from the music and applying it to the sneak peek video, and really having it to be stupid, like just over the top, like, Moose and Polo are dressed up in this, like, oh wow, look at how agenty they are. We just thought it was quite silly to have this like, really intense music and then this like Moose secret agent. It was just too silly to not do. So I loved that. And also loved the way that we interfaced with the writers. So what we did was Johnny and we had an intern at the time who was using the tour guide account, and that was, I think it was Alyssa at the time. And what we did was we went through Hootsuite. We used Hootsuite to manage all of our social at the time. And we went through and basically searched all of Twitter, and we found anytime, like we set up teams. So we had a team that was the social team, so social and community, which is me and Johnny and Alyssa. And then we had the writers as the fictional character. So we created an account that was Herbert. And so at the time, to me, it was brilliant, because what we did was anytime we found a mention of any PSA missions, spy stuff in anybody's feed, in Hootsuite you could assign it to a team. So we would assign it to Herbert. So it was almost like we were it was like the non-fiction team on the community side assigning over to the fiction team. And the fiction team is brilliant because you have like Deanna, who's a fantastic writer. She's got a great book out with her other half, Neil. They just put out Snazzy Cat Capers. Check it out. It's awesome. And then Cody, who created Adventure Capitalist later, he's a genius madman with a big beard, and he does great voiceovers. He's really brilliant creative, and he doesn't like boxes. He doesn't like being in a box. Sort of like, I can relate to that. So we had guys like, we had Deanna, we had Cody, we had my better half Emma, we had, I'm trying to think who else, might have been Stephanie as well. Stephanie, who's a black belt in karate, so she's hardcore. She's in Japan right now. I think that was it. But anyways, we had that team, and we would assign Herbert all this stuff, and so basically the team would go in and they would start replying, and then we could see in Hootsuite who replied to which post about the PSA. So we had that Club Herbert Twitter account, and it was like taking Herbert out into the real world and like playing up the fiction. Like, it was exciting, and watching people harassing Herbert back. Like, basically Herbert played a bully. Herbert showed up and just started, being really sarcastic back, and then players would be like, "We're gonna get you, Herbert," and it was fantastic. It was super entertaining. I loved that. And that to me was the party brought out into the real world, and it was a party that had story, because what I'm most excited about is story. Anything that has a reason for it, has a story, I'm much more excited about. That's why I love stuff like Final Fantasy. I think it's brilliant because it's led by a story. Zelda, A Link to the Past, fantastic story, really engaging. That stuff, I recommend it. If you're going to play great games, the ones with story are the ones to get. Those were the things that I really liked about that party. Obviously, Johnny did great work with the art director, Emily. So Emily had done a bunch of sort of still images, and then Johnny worked with her to make that into like an animatic, sort of an animated animatic, and that became the who is the director reveal. You find out who the director of the PSA and the EPF is, and I won't spoil it, I guess. By now you probably would have seen it. Anyways, that was, to me, the most fun. And I think what was really great about it was it felt like, some of the best Penguin times were the ones where the team, we all just got it, and we were on the same page about exactly what we wanted to do. And there are creative disagreements to make things better within that, but with Blackout, everybody just clicked and went on with it. What you may not know about Blackout is that this is probably the most important thing about Blackout is Operation Blackout was an event that couldn't have happened without the community, which is my number one favorite thing about Blackout. So Operation Blackout started because, at the very beginning, at the time that this happened, was around Christmas time. At the time that this happened, the community wanted something new for agents to do. And, I think if I remember correctly, we didn't have a lot for agents to do at that time. We had other focuses. I believe we were focusing a lot on ninja experience, so like really blowing out Karjitsu and making it bigger and more interesting and more games and building on top of that. Because it was such a popular game, we had to go where, people were going, or we chose to. So at the time, there was this real appetite with the community to go like, why are there not more agent things to do? And around Christmas time, we had this big roadmap. And if you guys aren't familiar in game development and software and SaaS companies, they all tend to work with this thing called a roadmap. Nowadays, there's lots of great tools like Product Plan, AHA, lots of great SaaS companies that are out there just to make product roadmaps. In fact, Jira, after they acquired Trello, just made roadmaps part of their tool. As a roadmap tool in Airtable, which I recommend. I love Airtable. And yeah, so at the time we had a roadmap that was on the board. It was pretty cool because it was on this giant sort of whiteboard surface on a wall. And then we had these big sort of dry erase magnetic strips. And so you could actually write on them with dry erase and then erase them, but they were like magnetic, so we could like move them around the board. So it's quite cool because it was tactile, so it was physical, so we could have a conversation. We could be in the hallway and we would have that. We would say, oh, should we do this and move this over here? And maybe we could do this event there. Or maybe we shouldn't do that party as a bring back. Maybe we could do a new party, but do we have enough resources to do that? Because we actually have to get this localization thing done. And you'd be surprised when you have a big team and then are trying to manage a virtual world of millions and millions of players in multiple languages with offices around the world. You can imagine it gets kind of complicated. With this whiteboard, it was our place to really think it out. It was like a sketch pad. But unfortunately, somebody had taken a picture of it just for the team down in the US, and I think they put it up on Dropbox or something. Anyways, this is an information security lesson for you. Luckily, we turned it into a positive. It was something negative that happened that we turned around, but basically that whiteboard photo leaked, which was kind of sad because if you've got a story and you're trying to be mysterious about this is what's coming up and you know that it's coming 6 months from now and you already know about it, and actually, to be honest, I don't want to work that way anymore. Lance and I have talked about this for Box Critters. Do you want to work 12 months in advance or do you want to be closer to the action, I guess? And you need a little bit of both. But in this case, I think we were a bit almost too far ahead. What was interesting about it was it had this big period where our developers needed a break so that they could go and fix stuff. So they needed just some time. So we wanted to give them some time in the schedule to say, this is your time. You don't have to do anything else. You're just going to be able to focus on this. And so we called it like Blackout. It was a client blackout. There's going to be no updates to the client code. And if you're familiar with client server, the client is the thing that users use, the front end, and the back end is the server, right? But in this case, there's blackout. And so it leaked, and then so it leaked out to the fans, and the fans, because there was no information or no context, all it said was one word, blackout. And I don't remember if I think the columns were there where you could see it was client, But even then, that's not enough information. Like, you would have to understand what a client is to know that we're doing a client blackout. So for whatever reason, because of that appetite to do, have new things, man, it was like, this is so exciting. What is it? What is blackout? What is blackout? So for me, I think, well, that's fantastic, because some of our best stories came from riffing off of ideas that were rumors and myths that were coming from fans. So, I would tend to watch little things that would happen around the community, and so would the art team, etc. Everyone on the team who was the most passionate would watch what was happening with fans, and then we would find a way to sort of introduce an element that sort of nodded to that idea. And to me, that was the most exciting stuff we ever did. And so when Blackout happened, we thought, oh man, wouldn't it be great? And at the time, Johnny was working as a PSR, but he wanted to prove himself out. He didn't want to just be doing customer support emails. His passion is music and video. He wanted to prove himself, so he had this big video that he was going to be working on with Super Sheep, Lisa. So Lisa was like, I needed something to help with tours, because we would bring tours in through the studio. And so they were working on what they called the tour video. And the tour video was just, we couldn't bother the team if we constantly had a number of tours coming through. It was a lot of time to be like interrupting the entire art team and software team, because the team was so big. That was an expensive interruption. So we sort of moved towards instead, we would have like one or two folks from the team go up to the tour in like the theater room, and we would give a tour there. And so what they wanted to do was give like an inside peek that was exclusive to that tour. But the problem was that video was so good. And Johnny went around and interviewed everybody. So we eventually, I just said, like, when we were launching the YouTube channel, I was like, this video is too good. I was like, Lane, don't you think we should launch this? He's like, absolutely. And so we, unfortunately, Lisa didn't appreciate this too much, but we had to basically put it live because it was way too good. It was way too good. We wanted fans all around the world to experience how great this video was that Johnny had, like, really, really worked hard on. And yeah, the one thing that was fun in that video is, they were interviewing the writing team. And at the time, I was on the writing team. This is just before the transition of starting, like, the social team. So at the time, he was coming in and interviewing the writers. And I said to Cody, I was like, Cody, it's only for tours, so what we should do, and this is before I realized that the video was going to be so good that we'd need to launch it, really publicly. But I was like, Cody, what we should do? We should riff on that blackout thing. You know how they said blackout and they're trying to, and one of the fans or a couple of the fans, there was a little bit of they turned it into like Operation Blackout or Mission Blackout. I can't remember if it was the fans that came up with it or if it was Cody. But we basically said, what if we pretended that was a real mission? Because at the time, people wanted a new PSA mission, which was not going to happen because those were just so expensive to make and so time consuming and took so much of the team. And then translation on those was one of the most expensive endeavors we had in the whole team, because there were, thousands and thousands of words per mission. And at the time, we didn't have the tools set up in place to actually, do it easier, to make localization easier. And we did our best. So Ricardo and his team, they would project manage and coordinate all the languages between everything. And so there'd be strings flying back all the time. So with this one, we were like, hey, Cody, why don't you put up like a picture of Herbert, and then also put up a picture, like we've got some pictures that the twins had made of like characters that hadn't been out yet. So we had this idea of, because there was Klutzy, but there was this other character, King Claudius, that we'd been germinating on internally. And we had decided, we don't want to introduce too many characters, so that's why we hadn't put him public. And so King Claudius, he puts up like a picture of King Claudius, puts up a picture of Herbert, and I was like, just put up a Word document and just start writing something. It doesn't matter what it is. It will make it sort of slightly out of focus anyways, so just riff on something, do a first draft, whatever. Pretend you're actually going to write a mission, just go for it. And so he does. We get this nice over-the-shoulder shot for like a couple seconds in the B-roll in the video. So you're cutting, it's like, you know, Emma's talking, and then, you know, it cuts to somebody smiling and somebody working at a computer. You usually do this when you're doing video production because you get bored of people talking like me, talking head, talking to the camera. It gets boring for some people. You know, maybe you don't like the way the person looks or talks or whatever, so the easiest way to cover that is to B-roll, so cut to something else while the person talks, so the person keeps talking, here's new footage. So he dropped in this clip of you know, Cody working on this document, so he made it look like we were actually working on something to do with Blackout. And of course what that did was take this very small group of people that were like talking about Blackout, what's Blackout, and it wasn't a lot. It was like maybe a fan blog, maybe on a forum, and we just said, let's blow it out. And so at that time, so then it just stoked the fire. And the great thing is we left the fire burning. So for a long time, we didn't do anything with Blackout, but it just kept organically growing. Fans were talking about it, and suddenly they would start writing into the support team. And so you'd be writing an email and you'd go and contact the PSRs, the player support representatives. And you know, what we would see is like when something was just a couple emails, it may not have sort of made it to be like a big enough splash to actually really reach the team. But we had this report called the Community Assessment Report, the CAR report. And in the CAR report, it would summarize, these are all the things that player support is seeing. That sort of expanded to such a point where it made it to the CAR report. And now suddenly, over time, we're hearing more about Blackout, where the whole team is, rather than just, you know, folks who are watching fan blogs and whatnot. And yeah, the rest is history. Eventually we decided that we should do something spy. We're ready to support it. Let's try it, and let's do it as a party, because parties are successful and they're working for us. So why don't we do that? And there you go. So that's my perspective on Operation Blackout. And obviously it's not the whole story, because again, I'm one of over 1,000 people that worked on Penguin. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if there's something that you'd like me to vlog about in the future, please feel free to tell me. And if you haven't checked it out yet, do check out Screenhog's videos, because they're quite enjoyable. I love his Orchestra of One series. He's such a talented musician, and I love his breakdown of how he does music, and he's a good guy with a good heart. You should follow him. So anyways, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and see you later.